confidence in the company's performance?
Yes, they do. We all do. We feel like we've built a fundamentally extremely strong company that's got a great platform to expand our markets and our business.
Okay. Do you know in 2008, or starting in 2008, about how much money that First Solar executives pulled out of the company? Or in other words, selling their own stock?
No, I don't.
$2.1 billion. And I think you yourself maybe pulled out roughly $400 million. Okay, is that right?
I don't know the dates, but I did sell stock over an extended period of time. That's correct.
Okay, well, this program that we're trying to decide whether it's good or bad, 22 of the 26 prospects on these loan guarantees were rated basically as junk. And so when you say the company's doing well, your executives clearly didn't have the confidence. They were pulling their own money out, but yet you think it's okay for the taxpayers to invest in this?
Well, with all due respect, I disagree with the statement that the executives didn't have confidence. I mean, we've got a deeply committed team. There is a lot of money still invested on the part of that team, and we are focused and growing, and we are fundamentally strong, so I disagree.
Okay, so for $300 a share to 17 for the executives, I guess you just got out. It was good timing?
Look, I sold my shares over a multi-year period under transactions that were fully and properly disclosed.
Okay, well, that's your business. Let's move on. Did First Solar pressure the Department of Energy to approve its 3 loan guarantee projects by promising that the loan guarantees would enable First Solar to build a new manufacturing plant in Arizona that would create new jobs?
No, we did not.
Can we put up slide 3? Okay. Does that look familiar?
I've seen this email, yes.
Okay. Would that insinuate that maybe they were pressuring them to move forward on this project to
No, it would not. It would not at all. These projects were all evaluated independently on their own merits. The manufacturing facility, which we hope to build at some point in Mesa, was in no way connected with the applications or the projects.
What is the status of the plant in Arizona?
It's on hold.
Okay, so you're saying that that wasn't used to entice the DOE to package these loan guarantees to push them to approve it? You didn't promise that it would create new jobs?
We did not promise. The loans were not packaged, and it was not part of the process. The loans were evaluated specifically on each project's fundamentals.
Okay. So the plan is not producing solar panels for the Department of Energy loan guaranteed projects. They're not producing those that First Solar promised. You're saying they didn't promise that?
Did not promise that, no.
Okay. That's all I have for now. I yield back.
I thank the Chairman. Dr. Desjardins, I think your questioning is right in line. You know, one of the things I think that comes into play when we have these hearings is that there's a question about respect for the people that come in and testify. And I want you to understand that we do have the utmost respect for you. But I also want you to understand that the most basic responsibility I have as serving in Congress is respect of the hardworking American taxpayers that fund all these projects that you're talking about. And I get confused sometimes where is it that we're really looking to protect and who is it that we're looking out for. And I got to tell you, coming from the private sector, I've never had the luxury of having the government underwrite loans for me. I've always had to provide my own capital, had to provide my own character, had to provide everything from the private sector comes from yourself. And that's what concerns me, Mr. Ahern. I got to tell you, your SEC filings, and maybe we can put up a slide. Can we put up a slide that shows, I think it's on slide 17 maybe. Because Dr. Desjardins asked you about the performance of your company. You're saying you have such great confidence in your country and how well your company's doing. And I look at it, goes from $303 a share, I believe. You know what it traded at yesterday was $15 a share. So I don't know. I'm not questioning your investments. I'm just questioning when you say you think it's doing quite well and you have great confidence in the company. Why would you sell so much of your own stock in it? Why would you cash in on it?
Well, let me give you the reasons why I think it's so fundamentally strong.
No, don't give me that. I really look at the chart. I don't think you're fundamentally strong at all. I think your shareholders are the ones that tell you. In the marketplace, you're doing a terrible job. But whenever you sell your own shares of stock, and the people that are on your executive board sell your shares of stock, you know, in August 9th, 8th, or 7th, 8th, and 9th, you sold almost 700,000 shares of stock in a 3-day period. Now, you're voting with your feet. You're getting the heck out of a situation. Say, I got to get out of this. But what I would really like to do, I would like these hard-working American taxpayers to put money into my company. I'm the CEO. I know what's going on. I've been there from its birth. I'm watching this thing grow, and I have so much confidence in that company that I'm going to cash out. I'm going to take my money and run, and I'm going to ask these hardworking American taxpayers, just keep funneling money in, because someday, somewhere out there, this dream's going to come true. The hopes and dreams of a company that someday, this is the hockey stick, it's flat, and someday it's just going to go off the charts. Now, we don't know when that day is coming, but someday it's going to be there. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not going to be there to watch it. I'm going to cash out now. I'm taking my money and I'm running. But I want you folks out there that go to work every day, get up every day, go to work, pay your taxes, clothe your kids, put food on the table. I want you to continue to fund this project, because you know what? Someday this is going to be great. I mean, I can't believe we sit here and we listen to this, and the question comes up is, who in the world is funding these projects? It's not the DOE. This is not the DOE's money. This is hard-working American taxpayers' money, and I'm so sick and tired of hearing about this respect. We don't have respect for green energy. We don't have respect for these folks that put everything on the line. When you're getting out of something as quick as you can and asking taxpayers to go in deeper and deeper and deeper, what message does that send?
I started this company in 1999 and spent over 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah, and we started our company
money,
in 1953.
and investment in the
Yeah,
company.
I understand, but I didn't have taxpayers bail me out on this thing. I got to tell you, this is disappointing. You tell me it's okay for you to sell $450 million in $450 million you pulled out. Is that right?
If I may,
Would my friend
This
yield?
is just a yes or no question. No, not right now, Mr. Cosenza.
I don't have the numbers, so I don't know.
It's your SEC filing. I do have the numbers. I do have the numbers. And to sit here and listen to this week after week, month after month, and then go back out and listen. When I go back home, when I see people paying as much for a gallon of gas as they pay for a gallon of milk, when I see people working 2 jobs to put food on the table and clothes on their kids' back, when I see people that worry about whether they're going to have a job next year, and then we're telling them, well, don't worry about it, we're looking out for you. No, the respect comes to the American taxpayer. That's who the respect comes from. I have no respect for a situation where the chief executives take their money and run and ask the American taxpayers to continue to fund a project that's going $300 a share to $15 a share, and you guys are doing well. I don't know where the heck you define well or what dictionary you look it up in, but this is absolutely abysmal, and this is why the American people have a great deal of wonderment now in the lack of trust in the people they send to represent them. The DOE made a horrible, horrible decision and continues to do that. So, Mr. Kucinich, I apologize for not yielding back to you, but it's hard to yield back when I've got to go back home and walk in western Pennsylvania and watch people who can't make their house payments, can't make their car payments, can't put food on the table, can't educate their kids, and we find out that we're pouring money down an open hole, and the chief executive officers bailed out and asked the taxpayers to put more money in.
I ask unanimous consent for the gentleman to have another 3 minutes, and I would ask the gentleman just to yield briefly to me.
Yep.
Well, my time's up, but
Unanimous consent, so you can have 3 more minutes. I share your passion for what happens with taxpayers' dollars that are involved in investments, but I think what would be helpful is we could have the witness respond for a couple of minutes and explain your position on this and address the concerns that Congressman Kelly has raised.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Gentleman may respond.
The first point I would make is that the DOE loans that we're talking about in this case were not made to First Solar. This was not First Solar's private capital, corporate capital funding. These loans were made to 3 projects that First Solar is supplying product to that are owned by sophisticated utility investors with utility offtakes. So these are projects, not funding to First Solar. This is not the same kind of situation as Solyndra or Abound or these manufacturing loans. First Solar's corporate funding is provided by equity funding, which initially came through our venture capital company, starting back in 1999. We took the risk that you're talking about should be taken by venture capital and not taxpayers. We took that risk. We were successful and able to bring the company public. As a public company, there is typically a replacement of venture capital money for institutional money. It is a very normal thing for venture capitalists, once they take a company public, to sell stock over time, get the proceeds so that they can go recycle that back into early-stage companies. That's what happened here. This is, the sales by me and other people on the team have absolutely no reflection on our conviction and belief in the company and its fundamentals. And if I could just, on the fundamentals of the company, look, we've guided to $3.5 billion of revenue this year, net income on a GAAP basis of around $350 million, operating cash flow of around $1 billion this year. We've pointed out that we have multi-year visibility into demand that will continue to drive strong profits and cash flow, and we're now expanding into emerging markets without the need for subsidies, taking what we've demonstrated with the benefit of the DOE loan guarantee program and deploying that through exports into other markets. What happens to the stock price day to day is subject to all kinds of things beyond our control, not the least of which are short interest investors. So I can't control that. I can't speak to it. I can control the fundamentals, and I'm telling you they're very sound.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania, wish to respond?
Yeah. No, and I understand everything you're saying, but I'm talking about your personal money. When you're pulling money out, you're selling 700,000 shares, and I get it. I get it. Believe me. I get it. Venture capitalists will always take a risk that's underwritten, and the lower the risk, the more money they put in, and the higher the risk, the more interest they want. These are loans that there really is no payback. This is a loan from a DOE that really is kind of it's a gift. It's free money. It's free money. It really is. It's free money. You don't have to qualify the same way I have to do. Listen, believe me, I've done it every day of my life. I've had to actually go out and borrow money, put up my own collateral, have my own skin in the game. So I don't want to go with this stuff. I just came from Disney World, by the way. There's a fantasy land down there, too. It's not like this one. You actually have to pay your own way there. You don't get it for nothing. But I got to tell you, when you tell me that as a CEO, if Steve Jobs had done that, if Bill Gates had done that, what do you think these people would think of that? They say, yeah, you know, Jobs is getting out of it. Must be a good investment. I'd like to get back in. Gates is getting out of it. These guys aren't pulling out. So I just wonder, so what was the reason for you selling 700,000 shares in a three-day period? Why? And you know what? The other thing is, why don't you buy it back now at $15 a share? It's got to be a real bargain.
And I think I
just think what you could buy with the $450 million you got.
I will go to, if the ranking member of the full committee is ready, I'll go to him. If he wants to wait, I can go to Mr. Mulvaney and come back to Mr. Cummings.
No, I'm ready. Thank you very much.
Go right ahead.
I want to, first of all, this question is for our loan guarantee recipients on the panel. Each of your companies receive loan guarantees for projects you're currently advancing, and I believe it's legitimate and appropriate for members of Congress and the taxpayers to ask what you're doing with the money, and I'm sure you would agree with me. Can each of you articulate, or a few of you, for this committee, why you believe that a loan guarantee provided by the government to your projects is a good bet? In other words, what are the taxpayers getting in return for their investment? Because I don't want people to look at this on C-SPAN and think they're not getting something out of it, that is the taxpayers. Would one of you or two of you try to answer that as best you can? Yes, sir.
I'd be happy to, yes. In the case of First Solar, there are 3 loans that have been made to projects, large power plant projects in California that are owned by sophisticated energy companies. These loans have been investment grade rated. So the taxpayers, first of all, will receive a return of all of that money, $3 billion. They will make a profit in addition to that totals roughly $1 billion. The funding is allowing for roughly 1,200 construction jobs over the life of the projects. It is further enabling the industry, the renewable energy in the industry in the U.S. to continue to grow and become profitable and export-oriented, which will in turn create more jobs. So this will prove to be a very prudent and timely.
So it really does have a multiplier effect, does it not?
Yes, it does.
Mr. Fairbanks, could you answer that same question?
Yes, sir. We received a $98.5 million loan from John Hancock, backed by the DOE loan guarantee. And the 1705 criteria, there was a job criteria. We did create a significant amount of new jobs. And another part of the criteria was to allow companies to obtain senior debt financing. We had borrowed money to construct the plant on a mezzanine level, and we used a good part of the money to put in place senior debt financing and replace some of the mezzanine debt.
Let me just ask this. If DOE followed a mandate from Congress when it created the loan guarantee program, then each of the products under your stewardship has some risks associated with it. Mr. Woodard, can you explain why it is so difficult to find financing in the private sector when bringing innovative technology to scale?
Sure. We received our early backing as a company from venture capital, who financed the company. We then brought corporate investors in, including Chevron, British Petroleum, and others. And as we looked at scaling up, the first thing we did was de-risk everything with a demonstration facility, and grew that from a 6-megawatt facility that we did in Israel to a 30-megawatt facility for Chevron. And then to go to the large-scale power plants that had been proven, there was not technology risk, but to do it at the size and scale that was needed, the loan guarantee enabled that transition. And I'd like to answer your first question as well on what the project is doing well for the taxpayer. We have a $1.6 billion loan guarantee that enabled a $2 billion project. There's 1,700 jobs on site today, but more importantly, behind this, there are 10 more projects that we have contractual commitments or power purchase agreements to build. That'll be $10 billion that will be commercially financed. So this enables the transition from a loan guarantee program to commercial financing, and I think that's very important.
Would you have been able to do all of what you just said without the guarantee?
No, we would have likely done a smaller, we wouldn't have been able to do it at the scale that allowed us to commercialize.
You know, the reason why I'm asking these questions is because I think it's very easy to demonize programs, and then a lot of times we don't hear the other side of it, and that is the benefits that the taxpayer gets, the benefits that, you know, it's a situation where your government is working with private industry. We always talk about creating jobs, and all three of you all have talked about jobs being created, but you're also talking about innovation. Am I right?
Yes, sir. There's quite a bit of innovation enabled.
In what sense? How so? Could you just talk about that for my last 10 seconds?
Well, we built projects, solar thermal projects in the 1980s that used an older technology called parabolic trough. We were then able to move to a higher efficiency, higher performance technology because of this program. It enabled that technology shift.
Thank you very much. And other thing, Mr. Chairman, I ask that my opening statement be admitted into the record, please.
Without objection.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now turn to Mr. Mulvaney, who's been patiently waiting. The gentleman from South Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you also to the ranking member, Mr. Kucinich, for allowing me to participate. Gentlemen, I'll be honest with you, on several levels, this hearing has been very difficult for me to sit and watch. As somebody who comes from the private sector, it's not easy for me to sit here and watch you have to defend things that ordinarily wouldn't be any of our business. Mr. Hearn, what you do with your investment capital and the company you've built for the last 13 years and what you might want to do to take care of your family and reward yourself for the work that you put in should be none of our business. And I desperately want it to be none of our business. But recognize the fact that you are not here today because of what you do. You're not here today because of stock that you sold, or any of you here because of what industry you participate in. You're here because you've asked us to be here. You've brought this on yourselves, and I hate to tell you that, but it goes beyond the loan program. I mean, we'd be silly, we'd be foolish to think that representatives of your industry, even if not yourselves as individuals, have spent time walking up and down the halls of these buildings in Washington for the last decade, asking us to make people buy what you sell. We have requirements, Mr. Chairman, that we have to purchase a certain amount now of our energy from renewable resources. It's a federal mandate. You've asked us to do that. I wish that you hadn't. I wouldn't have supported it, but you asked us to come in and say, look, to the American people, you have to buy what these people are selling. I'm completely sympathetic to Mr. Kelly, who would like very much for the federal government to go and tell people they have to buy X number of cars and have to buy it from him. But he didn't get to do that. When I was building houses, I didn't get that. When I was rolling burritos at a restaurant, there was nothing that said people had to come to my restaurant and buy my product. Beyond that, the loan program is simply on top of that. Not only is the 1703 program, the government guarantee program, remember, and I think this is lost on a lot of people who are participating or watching, the 1705 program is different in that ordinarily under the old program, y'all would have to pay the credit subsidy cost. But under the stimulus program, under the 1705, you didn't even have to pay that. The taxpayers had to pay that. So a little skin in the game that y'all would have under the 1703 program isn't even there under the 1705 program. It's effectively a free program to you folks. And that's why we're here. We're not here because we don't like you as private business, and we're not here because we don't want you to be successful. To the contrary, I want you gentlemen to be successful. I want you to grow your companies. I want the stock to go back up to $300, Mr. Ahern, because I know it not only benefits you, but it benefits every one of your employees who probably has a retirement program that buys that stock. But you have to be here today when you ask us to get involved in your business, and you have to be here today when you ask us to make people buy what you sell. And I encourage you to consider that. The next time you come walking up and down the hallways and say, well, I think it would be great if we took that renewable component from 10 or 15 to 20 or 25 or 35%. And wouldn't it be great if we had to have more electric vehicles? That would be great because we make some of that stuff too. I'm tired of people coming to the government as part of their business plan. Of saying, look, if we can figure out a way to make the government buy our stuff, that will really help us. And you know, conversely, if we could make the government make what our competitors sell illegal, that would be even better. And we see that every single day. And quite frankly, gentlemen, as somebody who came from the private sector, I'm sick of it. I wish you would compete on your merits and that we would compete on our merits in my business. Mr. Ahern, I hear what you're saying. You're saying the low-cost producer, you're down to 73 cents a kilowatt hour. It's a tremendous success for your company. Please stop asking us to help you do that. As bad as I feel for what you've had to go through here today, Mr. Ahern, explaining your stock purchases, you've brought every single bit of it on yourself. We know it. We have to do it. Mr. Kucinich does. Everybody up here knows we just filled out our financial disclosures. Well, we have to tell everybody in the country every single investment that we make that is worth more than $1,000. We have to do that every single year. We choose to do that to ourselves when we run for these offices. And what you gentlemen have endured today and will endure, because it's not going to get easier. It's going to get worse. What you've brought upon yourselves today, you have brought upon yourselves by coming here and asking us to help you. Mr. Chairman, I know that was not going to be my line of reasoning, but it took my 5 minutes, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I thank the gentleman, and to the gentleman's point, we have with us Mr. Nelson, who did exactly what the gentleman described. He didn't come ask for help, and his company is succeeding, and we applaud that. We'll turn now to the chairman of the full committee, the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Willen, on September 2nd, 2010, your name appears as the CEO of BrightSource, along with Peter Darby as the chairman of PG&E, holding at BrightSource Energy in Oakland, California, a fundraiser for Friends for Harry Reid. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir, I did.
So the Senate Majority Leader was pretty important to you and important enough for you to hold it in your corporate offices?
Well, with PG&E, we've been asked to do this, and we also have some projects in Nevada as well.
Yes, I know. Well, let me ask a question. First of all, did you speak to, when was the last time you spoke to the Secretary of Commerce, Bryson?
It would have been before he was appointed Secretary of Commerce. I've not spoken to him since.
Oh, so it was during the time, though, that he was the chairman, right?
He was chairman of our company,
right,
from until he was nominated to Commerce, which would have been middle of last year.
Okay, now, my understanding is it takes a while to get vetted, it takes a while to get nominated, it doesn't happen overnight. So my question is, when he was the chairman, you were the president, and he wrote his email to Mr. Daley, that was 2 months before he got the job. Weren't they already in discussions? Wasn't he essentially lobbying for your organization as the heir apparent, the person they were looking at to be Secretary of Commerce, and at the same time lobbying for you?
No, sir, I don't believe he actually sent that email. We basically decided that was not appropriate to send, and ultimately did not. That email was
So
never
were there other emails that were sent during that period of time to the White House or others at the White House?
No, sir, there was nothing to my knowledge that was sent.
So this is just a draft that still was hanging around?
Exactly. We decided that it was not appropriate and did not send it.
Now,
in addition, John, we were very careful with every organization that John worked with. He was very, very careful from that perspective.
well, it is interesting. You know, the Secretary is the founder of the Natural Resource Defense Council, right? And that group, while he was heading a public utility, that group actually produces and participates in lawsuits that drive up the cost of energy, don't they?
They are an intervener in a lot of siting issues with renewables.
Yeah, so it's sort of amazing. They drive up the cost of energy, particularly conventional energy, through a series of lawsuits, and incumbent utilities get paid a markup on whatever their costs are, even if those costs are driven up by an organization that is founded or participates with people who are insiders. So I do find it interesting that he now is supposed to make be in charge of making America competitive, but in fact has driven up the cost. Mr. Willard, and for that matter, each of you on the panel, your company would not exist today if not for the loans and the mandates. Is that correct? At least as we know it.
No, sir. I think it would be fair to say that we would not be doing as much business in the United States. We would be working in other countries, other jurisdictions more heavily without the loans or the mandates.
Mr. Ahern, would you say the same thing, that your Malaysia factory would still be selling in Europe and you'd still be in business and you'd still be an S&P 500 listed company if not for domestic mandates and guarantees?
We would still be a successful company, but we would not be in the financial condition, sound financial condition we're in, and we would not have successfully entered the U.S. utility market. So we would be a smaller company without this.
Isn't it true that if not for a waiver as to the carcinogens that are in your PVs, that in fact you wouldn't even be in the European Union at all? You needed a waiver for your technology to be fielded?
No, that's not true. The product isn't carcinogenic. There is an elemental material, cadmium, that's in a stable compound.
But it needed a waiver in the European Union for you to field it, didn't you?
It didn't, no.
It didn't. And you didn't rely on a single study that you paid for in order to convince people of that?
No, we didn't.
You didn't pay for it, or you didn't, or wasn't heavily relied on?
We didn't. I don't remember paying for one, nor that a single study would have been relied on. But I think what referring to is the European Commission undertaking analysis about how to regulate photovoltaics and all the various sub-technologies. And this question did come into play about what do you do with cadmium telluride because there's cadmium in it and so forth. The Brookhaven National Laboratory and then several comparable groups in Europe had done studies. We also funded studies, and I think there was a
studies or a study?
Multiple.
Multiple studies. If you could give our committee copies of those studies, because we were unable to find the quantity that you're referring to.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, thank you. I hope there'll be a second round.
Yes, there will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The gentleman from New Hampshire, if he's ready to go, we can go to him. Someone's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. I want to talk to Mr. Fairbank about your loan guarantee. My understanding is your loan guarantee was about $98.5 million. Is that accurate?
That's correct.
Okay. Can you tell me what it means when a generation facility is placed in service and online?
That means the power plant is up and running and operating at least 20% of its capacity.
Okay. Can you tell me when the Blue Mountain project was placed in service?
Was placed in service in October 2009.
And when did Nevada Geothermal receive its loan guarantee?
We received our loan guarantee on September 3rd, 2010.
So a full year after you were online and operational?
That's correct, and I guess the process from when we submitted our application until we got the guarantee, that was a 10 or 11-month process.
Okay. What was the reason that you wanted the loan guarantee when you first started the process?
We were wanting to have a permanent financing. We actually had worked with John Hancock to work on a loan from John Hancock, and they made the application to DOE.
Okay, so you had an existing either line of credit or loan from John Hancock?
No, sir.
Did you have, so what money did you use to get this online?
We used, we actually had a facility on commercial terms with a senior investment bank in New York to construct the project. They withdrew that commitment through the summer of 2008, and we needed to scramble to obtain a mezzanine debt loan from TCW, which was a $180 million facility. At the time, we thought of that as a bridge loan, and we would be borrowing, we thought, $70 million. And then we thought we'd go back to the banks for the remainder of the money that we needed to build the plant. As it happened, several months after that, as you know, the banking crisis was, none of these banks were operating. So we ended up borrowing $180 million from TCW to build the plant. That's how we built the plant. And then that wasn't in any way any permanent financing. It was, originally we thought of it as a bridge loan. It was a very expensive interest rate, and we used it for construction. So we used the John Hancock loan and that was backed by the DOE loan guarantee to pay back a portion of that loan. We also hadn't finished our work. We had built the plant, as I think you are pointing out, and that's only a portion of the project. We had not finished our work on the well field, so a portion of the funds were also to be used to finish the well field.
Okay, so you did have financing, albeit not permanent and at a high interest rate.
That's correct.
You then could not get through normal channels a bank loan.
We may or may not have been able to get through normal channels of banking.
Well, you mentioned that that's around the time of the banking crisis, so I'm inferring from that that your position would be that you couldn't get access to...
When we were wanting to build the plant?
Yeah.
Well, actually, we were forced into that loan because we had started with our EPC contract, and they were given a limited notice to proceed. And if we hadn't acquired the rest of the money that we needed to finish the plant, we wouldn't have been able to hold schedule relative to the PPA, and we wouldn't have been able to hold the costs, so that the EPC contractor had guaranteed a delivery time and a cost.
Okay, but you did have that financing in place, and you did actually get the plant up and running, because the plant was operational back in October of '09. So I guess my point is, why would you then get a loan in September 2010, a year later? I mean, to me, it sounds not like a loan. It sounds like a bailout of your business plan.
It wasn't a bailout of the business plan. It was putting in place senior debt financing, which was one of the primary goals of the 1705 program.
Could you get that financing anywhere else?
We utilized the program that was there. The banks...
Could you get the financing from the private sector?
It's possible we might have been able to. It's a bit speculative whether we would have or not. I'm sure that we would have found a way.
Did you try? Or did you just choose to go solely into the 1705 program?
Well, we went to the market.
Yeah.
And we had, my recollection was 4 commercial bankers, investment houses make proposals. John Hancock made the best proposal, so we basically went with John Hancock to see if we couldn't put together a commercial loan. And John Hancock made the application to DOE because that program was available, and it was a great assistance for them to be able to do that. I don't know if Hancock would have done it without the loan guarantee. They said they might. But obviously the DOE loan guarantee helped them make their decisions.
Well,
And we weren't involved with that. I mean, we weren't the applicant for the DOE loan guarantee. That was John Hancock. We were involved peripherally.
but you were the recipient of the money.
We were the recipient of the John Hancock money, that's right.
Okay, and you knew that they were going for 1705?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you have the plant in place. You file the application. You say that you had an opportunity in the private sector, but you for whatever reason, you opted not to utilize those loans, probably because this one was a better rate. You then repaid existing dollars. So the point of this is that the stimulus, whether you agree or disagree with it, the point of it was to create jobs. What jobs did this create? This was repaying an existing loan for an existing plant that was already in operation.
It was operating at 22 megawatts at the time that we received the loan, so we had placed it in service, but it wasn't operating at its full capacity, so we had to finish the well field. And I think it's been very transparent in our Part 1 application for the loan, exactly where the money was to be spent. A portion was to pay down the TCW facility, and a portion was to finish the well field.
I just don't see it as a good business practice for the Department of Energy. Excuse me, reclaiming my time, sir. I don't see it as a good practice for the Department of Energy to use taxpayer subsidized loans to provide to an entity that already has an existing facility.
Well,
I mean, that's my personal point of view, but I don't think taxpayers in this country want DOE providing taxpayer loans to a company to pay back a loan on an existing facility. But my time has expired. The chairman has been very gracious. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
Thank the
I
gentleman.
didn't hear a question there, but so I'll just not address that.
Okay, great. Gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just following up on the gentleman's statement, I share his situation, which is if DOE had said, look, we'll give you X amount of additional money, but you can't pay back your own associated parent company, you'd have still taken the money. Bottom line is money flowed to a loan prepayment to yourself effectively as part of it, something that is, as I understand it, is prohibited by DOE, but I'm not going to ask you if it's prohibited for DOE to do it, because they obviously did it, as they did so many things that were wrong in the case of these loan guarantees. Mr. Ullin, I just want to make sure the record's clear. When I asked about, your strong support for Senator Reid, and obviously we went over these letters earlier that show that there was direct political influence with the Chief of Staff and the President, I wasn't implying there's anything wrong in these contributions. I mean, ultimately, most of the energy companies, including all the public utilities in California, have historically supported me. It's not the money. It's just I wanted to make it clear that Senator Reid was very important to you, as he obviously was to Mr. Fairbanks. I want to go back, though, to Mr. Ahern. I want to make sure I get your statement correct. That's why I asked to go first this round. You said that you had multiple studies, but isn't it true that by your own PowerPoint, which we have, when it says risk, we are almost completely reliant on Vasilius and his team? That's what that is multiple studies done by one person. Isn't that true? I mean, basically, your support for your risk, which is our research ultimately proves, if it proves unpersuasive, Essentially, this carcinogen incorporated, and you say not a risk, you had to convince the Commission, and his multiple studies were a big part of how you convinced them. And a risk was you wouldn't be selling in Europe if his studies, which you did pay for, hadn't helped bolster your case. Now, isn't that a more accurate statement rather than you're saying that there were multiple studies and you didn't remember if you paid for it? You did pay this organization. You relied heavily on it. It's in your own PowerPoint statement. Isn't that true?
I respectfully, I need to break that down.
Okay,
I don't think that's true, no.
Did Vasilius receive money from your company for any or all of these studies?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Were you heavily, almost completely reliant on his studies?
I would say no.
Okay, you say no. So the fact that your own PowerPoint shows that as a risk?
I don't know the context, of this slide or where it was made. I mean, I'm
Well,
happy.
it was made by you folks and delivered under our discovery.
I just don't know the period of time or what that was prepared.
Oh, I apologize. We got it from a whistleblower. You didn't give it to us. Okay. But are you saying that you don't believe it's yours?
No, not at all. I'm just saying I can't, that particular quote, without the context, I'm not sure what it means. But I would be happy to give you more
We'd be happy to get more of these in discovery, since we had to get this from a whistleblower who basically says, look, you were reliant completely on this individual. The whistleblower informs us that you did pay, so we'd look forward to getting that right. And, what we're seeing is you needed this to work to get into European Union, and you needed the money to be where you are today. I'm going to ask one question because I've been waiting to ask this for a long time, ever since they berated General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler when they came in. What kind of jet did you fly in on today?
Oh, I flew in yesterday.
Yesterday.
On a Challenger.
A Challenger, 604, 605?
300.
300, oh, one of the new super minis. So it's pretty efficient. That was a nonstop flight from, I assume, Tempe, or?
Yes. Okay.
I just think that if you're so concerned about, and I know it's more efficient than the big birds, but is that really environmentally sensitive?
Well, and let me point out that has nothing. First Solar did not pay for that. First Solar had nothing to do with
Okay,
that.
well,
That's something I did on my own. And
oh yeah, we're not going to ask him if he used the money he took out of the company. Staff has always got better questions than I would. I wouldn't ask that. Let me just ask one more question. Your production facilities, do they use your solar panels for the energy that they produce in order to manufacture?
Not for the end. Not probably.
Okay.
Wouldn't be for some of it,
Is it true you looked at California and made a decision not to come into California because of two major factors, the regulatory environment and the cost of energy?
I don't know that that's the case. I think we looked at a number of places, and
You ruled out California, the very place that has the mandates that help many of your companies succeed, because we mandate that we buy your much higher, much subsidized cost. It drives up the ratepayer cost dramatically and makes manufacturing in California undesirable. So you decided not to manufacture in a high-cost area. You're basically, I see you're in Ohio, which is a low-cost energy area. You're in Tempe, Arizona, a low-cost energy area. They even use coal for some of their electricity. So is it fair to say that energy cost determines somewhat where, in addition to labor costs, where you manufacture?
I would say it would be one of a number of factors.
Well, what put you in Malaysia?
We wanted to have a base of manufacturing in Asia as well as Europe and North America as we were building out the company. And at the time, when we assessed the risk returns of the various Asian locations, having never done business in Asia, we thought Malaysia was a moderate risk, reasonable place to live.
Well, I'm going to close, but just noting that if these figures are still correct, Germany, 560 jobs, Ohio, 280, Malaysia, 1,680. It sounds like you're not an American company particularly. You simply have a small presence in Ohio and another one in Arizona that in fact, we put an awful lot of money into putting you into manufacturing in other countries outside America, and that in fact the loan program dramatically made it possible for you to have overseas jobs, not to have American jobs. Is that reasonably correct, that the majority of the jobs that you provide are not in America, and that the loan program facilitated that as much as anything?
Well, I would disagree respectfully with the overall characterization.
Not the characterization, just the numbers.
In sheer numbers, most of our full-time are outside of the U.S.
Okay, so jobs created with loan guarantees, stimulus and others, basically not American.
No. All those jobs are American, and all the jobs directly created with the loan guarantee.
Okay, so those jobs wouldn't be there except for these loans, but those other jobs would be, is your assertion?
So the manufacturing, offshore would be, but the R&D, the engineering, the hub of our business is here. That's supported by those. But sheer numbers, I agree with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
I thank the chairman. Gentleman from Ohio is recognized, Mr. Kucinich.
I want to thank my friend from California for his defense of American manufacturing, and also it seems that the majority is raising a new point of view with respect to the use of corporate jets, which I find interesting.
Dennis, you've worn me down over the years.
I know. It's finally happening. I also want to ask unanimous consent. I'm glad that you, my friend from California, and less recently from Cleveland, pointed out that Senator Reid didn't do anything wrong here. Matter of fact, I have unanimous consent. The record of contributions from PG&E to some of the most outstanding members of Congress, some of the absolutely best equipped to analyze business members of Congress who are included in this list, and I just would ask that be submitted. And I would also ask any member of the committee who wants to join me on HJ Res 100, which would end all corporate contributions, basically turn federal elections into public financing. Now, my HJ Res 100, any of you want to join in?
Would the gentleman yield?
Oh, of course.
I assume when you say corporate, you mean PAC money. Like you don't mean corporate, because corporate money's been banned since before you and I were born.
All private money. That's what I mean.
Thank
you. Okay, now the question, Mr. Woolard, in January 4th email to the DOE official, you referenced the fact that, quote, a large group in NYC focused on this transaction and DOE ability to execute. This email continues, quote, things are not good, and there's a sizable group of private equity investment banks writing a letter to Chu about the status of the program and the inability to get loans through, unquote. Now, I need quick answers. Mr. Woolard, did this investment group have their own money invested in the project?
They did not represent our project. It's a group called U.S. Pref.
Did they have their own money invested?
In multiple projects, quite a few.
Why were they frustrated?
It was private sector money that was coming in as the highest at-risk layer of money, the equity tranche, but the process at DOE was slow and things had
So the DOE review process was drawn out? Is that what you're saying?
It took a lot longer than had ever been expected or been represented.
So why did these private equity investors, in fact, send a letter to the Secretary, and if so, what did it say?
Yeah, I believe what the result of what this group did was they came down and talked directly to everybody from members, anybody who would listen to them. It was a large group, and they said that the program was not executing. They had private capital ready to deploy in the riskiest tranche, but they needed the.
So the private investors, would the private investors, utility company purchaser, and you all have reason to be critical of DOE's being too thorough in their review of your application?
That was basically, the theme was that it had taken a very long time. We took 4 years for a 2-year process.
Well, the email also says this, quote, Darby at PG&E talked directly to Obama about the program's challenges and the bad situation it puts him in. DOE credibility is thin, and I'm currently trying to put off comms with Hill until we talk, unquote. Now, Mr. Woolard, I assume that Darby refers to Peter Darby, former CEO of PG&E, correct?
Yes, sir.
And didn't California recently pass a law requiring utilities to begin purchasing renewable energy in 2014, and that as much as 33% of any utility's energy needed to be renewable by 2020?
Yes, sir. The relevant law at the time was 20%, and then it's been increased.
Isn't it also the case that securing a purchaser of the energy to be produced at your project was imperative to DOE's evaluation of Bright Source's loan guarantee application?
Both Bright Source and other loan guarantee recipients were critical to PG&E could not meet the RPS standards.
So what would happen if the DOE continued to drag it out, drag out the due diligence?
PG&E was at significant risk with the regulators because they wouldn't have been able to deliver.
Well, would they have faced sanctions from the state if they didn't meet the renewable energy standards?
I believe so.
So ultimately, Bright Source was awarded a conditional commitments in February 2010 and a loan guarantee more than a year later in April 2011, correct?
Correct.
So after all that DOE due diligence, do you believe that your DOE loan was awarded on its merits, or because of a conversation PG&E's CEO had with the President?
No, I believe it was all done on its merits. It was a very thorough process, and it started back in 2006, actually.
Okay, Mr. Ahern, the majority's recent report refers to First Solar's loan guarantee as a scheme characterized by failure to prove innovativeness. In March 2011, however, Arizona Governor Brewer praised First Solar's projects, stating the company's, quote, "presence in Arizona has been a great engine in driving our renewable energy sector forward." Senator McCain praised First Solar's decision to build in Arizona, and a top bundler for the senator's presidential campaign served on First Solar's board of directors since 2010. Do you believe First Solar's political connection had any bearing on the application process?
No, absolutely not.
Do you believe that your DOE loan guarantee application was awarded on its merits?
Yes, each of them underwent a very rigorous, detailed process.
Now, members of Congress, including members of this committee, have sent nearly 500 letters to Secretary Chu in support of green technology projects in their districts. Both Democrats and Republicans supported Abound Solar's loan guarantee application. Members of Congress also supported Nevada's geothermal loan guarantee projects. Mr. Whitsoe, Mr. Ahern, do you believe these members of Congress were requesting special treatment of your companies? Mr. Ahern?
No, I think they were doing what their constituents
Mr. Whitsoe?
expect.
No, not to my knowledge.
So, Mr. Chairman, I don't really think that. So you think they were awarded on the merits, Mr. Whitsoe?
I know we use the loan to build our new technology.
Awarded on the merits?
We doubled efficiency.
On the merits?
Yes.
On the merits?
Yes.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, this broad scandal we're talking about here, I don't know. I don't see it. I think we actually have a system here that's trying to work, and we should stop beating each other up on it. But we should invite. Yeah, I think it'd be good to have the private equity people in here, too. Thanks very much. Thanks.
I thank the gentleman. If we could put back up that email that the ranking member just cited, the January 4th, 2010 email from Mr. Willard to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Whitsoe, do you have any communications with the Department of Energy where you reference conversations with the President of the United States?
No, not that I know.
Mr. Fairbanks, do you have any communications with the Department of Energy concerning your loan guarantee program where you reference the President of the United States?
None whatsoever.
Mr. Ahern, do you have any?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Mr. Nelson, do you have any? No, sir. Imagine that. You don't have any. I mean, and this is, you read this paragraph. Also, Darby at PG&E talked directly to Obama, not the President, not the President of the United States, Obama, about the program's challenges and the bad situation it puts him in, the President himself, I assume that's referring to. DOE, Department of Energy's credibility is thin, and I'm currently trying to put off communications with the Hill until we talk. Now, if that's not political influence, I don't know what is. I mean, think about this. You all were, there's about a $15 billion program, right? You're all competing for some of that money. Mr. Nelson's not. I mean, it's amazing to me. Mr. Nelson, how did you do it? We've just had now 2 hours of the shenanigans that went on with this. How in the heck did you make it? How are you doing it?
We have a group of committed private citizens who love renewable energy, see the future, and have committed the funds to our management team and our technology.
Yeah. But you guys are actually, so Mr. Nelson's doing his own with private investment. He's making it. You guys, though, decided to compete for this available dollars. Do you think it's an unfair advantage for BrightSource to be able to talk directly to the White House? Put up the other email. Put up the other email. The one, yeah, this one. Put up the one right here where now, Mr. Willard has said under oath today that they did not send this. Is that correct, Mr. Willard?
That is correct.
Yeah. But just the fact, well, let me ask you, Mr. Whitsoe, did you ask the people at the Department of Energy if they would proofread a letter that your chairman of the board was thinking about sending to the White House Chief of Staff? Did you guys do that?
No, we did not.
Mr. Fairbanks, did you have a letter that you sent to the Department of Energy? The people are going to decide whether you get the loan or not. Did you have a letter that you asked them to proofread before your chairman sent it to the White House Chief of Staff?
We didn't do anything like that.
Okay, Mr. Ahern, did you guys ask the Department of Energy to proofread any correspondence you were thinking about sending to the White House Chief of Staff? Pretty important guy.
Not to my knowledge, no.
So do you think that potentially put you at a competitive disadvantage when you're trying to secure a loan guarantee program and help your company and help your projects?
You know, my view, going through the process we did, it wouldn't have mattered, honestly. I mean, this was a rigorous, very objective process.
But at least it raises the concern if a potential competitor for a scarce amount of dollars is citing conversations with the President of the United States in correspondence with the people making the decision, that at least raises some whistles and or some alarm bells, right?
I can understand the appearance.
Mr. Fairbanks, you think that raises some concern?
We received bipartisan support with.
No, that's not my question. Do
lobby.
you think correspondence from a potential competitor for a finite amount of money, where they cite conversations with the President of the United States, where they send a letter and ask them to proofread it and make edits to it, you think that maybe raises some concern?
I don't want to get involved with that.
Mr. Whitsoe? Might potentially, maybe, you think maybe a taxpayer would say, that might put Mr. Whitsoe's company at a little bit of a disadvantage to Mr. Bullard's company. You think so?
I can only comment that Abound had a fair process, and I think that's for you folks to.
Mr. Nelson, do you think it puts you at a little bit of a competitive disadvantage?
No, I don't. I think ultimately, I don't blame any.
That's an even better answer. That's an even better answer. We're back to Mr. Mulvaney's point. We shouldn't have had this goofy program going on in the first place. If you don't think it puts you, you can make it. I didn't expect that answer. I'll be honest with you, Mr. Kucinich. I didn't expect that, but that's even better.
I don't blame any of these gentlemen, who I have a lot of respect for working within the rules to get every competitive advantage they can, including getting government money. The problem is not in their approach. The problem is in the rules.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Mr. Woolard, do you want to, here's what I want to know. So you didn't send the correspondence to the White House. What happened in the course of applying and going through this process? What took place that led you and your company to believe it was okay to ask the people who are deciding, hey, can you edit this, because we want to send this from our chairman, who's going to be the next Commerce Secretary, to the White House Chief of Staff?
Mr. Chairman, I don't, frankly, as I go back through the last several years, I don't remember what exactly transpired and would have made something okay or not. Ultimately, we decided it was not smart to send, and it was not appropriate to send, and we wanted to make sure everything was clearly done on its merits, which I believe it was. And that was ultimately the goal, and we wanted to make sure it was a very clear and unambiguous process.
And I want to be quick here, because I know I'm over time. But I just want to be clear. When an email to the senior advisor to the Secretary of Energy uses this kind of language, also, Darby at PG, not Mr. Darby, not the CEO, Darby at PG&E talked directly to Obama. When you use that kind of language, this is not, Mr. Secretary, or Mr. Rogers, I know you work for Secretary Chu, and this is an important thing. We have, the CEO of PG&E has had the ability to talk directly to the President. This is casual, hey, we talked to Obama. This sounds like this was pretty common. You had some kind of relationship with folks at the White House where you can use this kind of language in correspondence to the people who are making the decision about $1.6 billion of taxpayer money.
Actually, I think it's important to read the language there, and I think it's important to note that Mr. Darby was talking about the program. And at that point in time, the DOE program was not getting loans out. It was not functioning. The program itself, nothing to do with, not Bright Source's loan guarantee, but the program was not getting loans done, and it was putting not just us, but many of his projects.
Let me ask you this:
at risk.
To the other email, the draft that you asked them to proofread, whose decision was it not to send that correspondence to Mr. Daley?
At the end, it was John Bryson and I said that's not appropriate and did not do it. So we had.
And do you think? I'm just curious for our panel. Do you see any concern, confusion, misstatements possibly, when you look at how the Secretary of Education, Mr. Chu, responded to my questions 2 months ago, where I asked him directly, did the fact that John Bryson at BrightSource, now the Commerce Secretary, have any influence on your decisions to grant BrightSource a loan guarantee of $1.6 billion, where I asked him, did they have any correspondence with the White House, and did any of that influence you? And I specifically mentioned the Chief of Staff. Do you guys think that there's any concern or confusion there? Mr. Nelson, think at least worth looking into?
Yeah, I think it is, although I have no basis to believe that it actually happened. But if there is some malfeasance in that regard, I'd look into it.
Mr. Whitsoe?
I don't have any knowledge of it.
Yeah, I figured you guys take that. Anyone else want to comment? I didn't think so. We'll turn next to the gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the full committee, Mr.
I yield a minute to Mr. Kucinich.
I thank the gentleman. A couple of things here very quickly. Going back to the memo from Mr. Woolard to Matt Rogers, the paragraph that reads, also Darby at PG&E talked directly to Obama about the program's challenges and a bad situation it puts him in. Now, is this memo talking about the bad situation Darby is put in, or the bad situation President Obama was put in? What do you?
As I wrote it, it's clearly PG&E was in a bad situation.
Okay, so this does not say the President was in a bad situation. This is about PG&E and Darby, right?
In fact, I believe even concurrent with this, there was a public report out that was starting to discuss their bad situation relative to the loan guarantee program exposure.
This comes up with a new aphorism that familiarity breeds investigation. I also want to thank my friends from this side of the aisle for exploring the mythologies of free market capitalism. Mr. Cummings, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, you have announced your intention to hold a follow-up hearing, and you committed to inviting Governor Schwarzenegger, and I would invite you to consider asking both Wall Street investors who wrote Secretary Chu and the former CEO of PG&E and ask them why they believe this project was so important. Would you do that, sir?
Yeah, I'll take that up with the chairman of the full committee committed to that. I'll take that up with Chairman
Thank
Eisner.
you very much. Gentlemen, I've been listening to you very carefully. I want to go back to something Mr. Nelson said. I believe that all of you are honorable people, simply trying to carry out a business in a very competitive world. And as I sit here and I listen to you, I am convinced that if I were you, I'd feel like I was being beaten up on for simply trying to do what was best for your businesses. And while we're sitting here going through this, there are people all through this United States that both parties claim they want to see become employed. Millions upon millions of them hoping and praying that they could get a job. And part of the stimulus bill was to try to get folk employed. And I, for one, believe that it was quite effective in doing that. I don't give a damn what anybody says. I wish we had more jobs. But one of the things it also was to do, and I quote from the law, it was to provide investments needed to increase economic efficiency by spurring technological advances in science and health, and to invest in transportation, environmental protection, and other infrastructure that will provide long-term economic benefits. And the reason why I'm getting into this is one of the things that we wanted to do was be innovative. I've said from many a podium that while we may go through our economic problems, we have to be, and the President said this, we have to be innovative, create jobs and be innovative. That's what the United States is all about. That's why we are the country that we are. And Mr. Nelson, I applaud you for saying what you said. You said, you know, you believe these guys. These are great guys, basically, was what you were saying. Maybe there's something wrong with the rules, but these are great guys being competitive. I want to ask you, Mr. Ahern, talk about innovation with regard to stimulus and jobs. Can you talk about that with regard to your company?
Yes, I sure can. Well, one way to think about it, these three projects we're talking about are the power equivalent of an average-sized nuclear plant. We've built something here that's never been done anywhere in the world. In order to build solar plants of that size and magnitude, we've had to solve a lot of problems that had never been solved before. We now have, even though they're not completely constructed, we have people coming from all over the world to see what we've done. And we've begun negotiations and discussions with potential customers in markets all over the world. As those markets take shape, the innovation and the job creation in the U.S. for our business and for our value chain will accelerate, because the creation of goods and services that are exported into these countries to meet their power needs will begin to open up and grow massively. And it was really keyed by getting solar off the rooftop into big utility-scale power plants. And that did require, and still does, the solution of a lot of pressing problems. And it can only be done, some of this can be done in the laboratory, some of it can only be done in the marketplace, at the project, encountering and solving problems. So that's the big piece. It directly created an average of 1,200 construction jobs, which is not trivial. It kept our factory and our supply chain here in the U.S. Running in a stable fashion, and will for several years. But the future, I think, is the export and the innovation that allows us to break into new markets, and this has been instrumental.
You know, Mr. Aaron, I often say our children are our living messages that we send to a future we will never see. And as listening to what you just said, and Mr. Chairman, I just asked that I get just 2 additional minutes like Mr. Gunter got. You know, the things you're talking about are things that I take it will have spin-off into a time when we're probably dead. I mean, in other words, what you're doing now. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. And, you know, there are lots of follow-on effects to this. I mean, one thing, with our success, we've put down a marker in the marketplace where Mr. Nelson and others are now competing to try to beat us. So you have a whole new wave of R&D opening. The Silicon Valley is full of startup solar companies that were funded to try to beat First Solar. And that's literally the motto that some of them have. And that's really what I think our country's been all about, is competition and innovation spurred by success and by market opportunities. It's a global marketplace, and the hub of the activity and the innovation will always be in the United States.
Mr. Willard?
In terms of innovation,
yeah,
really
and the value of innovation.
Yeah.
See, we're talking all this stuff here today, but the big picture is innovation and jobs, and how does the United States stay competitive? Yeah. You know, we hear a lot of talk, but we don't always walk the walk. And what I'm saying to you are the guys who are like on the front line, you know, like in the trenches, like having to make decisions, difficult decisions, putting your butts on the line every day. And I'm trying to figure here, I mean, so I'm just so glad that you're here and that you are the innovators. And I just wanted to just get an idea. I mean, while we're talking all this stuff, Chinese are running, I mean, just moving rapidly. And I just want to make sure we stay focused on what we need to stay on focus on. That is the United States being #1. I don't want to be #2. I don't want to be #3. We're better than that. And sometimes I think we get mired in stuff that distracts us, and then get mired in a culture of mediocrity and failure. And I think we need to be very careful with that. I think my time's up, unfortunately.
Mr. Nelson, you want to be #1? You want to have the best company you can possibly have?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Hey, Mr. Willard, just real quick, the email, the proofread email that you sent, and you asked them to take a look at, and you said that you did not send that to the White House Chief of Staff, Mr. Daley?
Yes, sir.
You know for certain, you clearly remember that you did not send that email?
I would not have sent it. I believe it would have been from John, and I don't believe John.
Well, which is it? He didn't send it, or you don't believe he sent it?
To the best of my knowledge, he did not send it.
So you know that you didn't send it, even though you're the one who asked for him to proofread it, and you, to the best of your knowledge, you think Mr. Bryson, the Commerce Secretary, didn't send it?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you communicate with the White House in some other fashion? Did you send him another letter? Did you call him? Did you go to the White House and meet with him about this issue?
No, I've never met with Mr. Obama.
Do you know if Mr. Bryson did? While he was still CEO, do you know if did did he meet with, did he discuss this on a phone call? Did he or you discuss this on a phone call with the White House Chief of Staff?
I certainly never have, and
You did not?
I did not.
And Mr. Bryson, to your knowledge?
To the best of my knowledge, did not.
Okay, just wanted to be clear. The gentlelady from New York is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize. Quite ironically, I've been chairing a subcommittee hearing for Veteran Affairs, making sure that the heroes of this country who've served our country in service and sacrifice are getting what they need, and our hearing today was on prosthetic devices. So I apologize for not being here for most of this morning's hearing. I want to just talk for a few minutes here. A few weeks back in March, Secretary Chu was here and talked to us about the loan guarantee program, and he praised the work that was being done by the Department of Energy. And 3 days after his appearance, right in this very room, the Secretary put out a memo, and the memo had to do with scientific integrity. And he stated in the memo, he laid out a very commendable framework for the Department of Energy, and specifically he stated, the Department's mission relies on objective, reliable, accurate, and accessible scientific and technical information. The Department of Energy is committed to ensuring a culture of scientific integrity, and I think we can all agree that that's a very laudable goal. In November of 2011, the Department of Energy responded to a letter from Chairman Issa, and I believe he referenced that earlier while he was here, with an explanation of the Department of Energy's awareness of the risks associated with cadmium telluride. In that letter, as their source, they cited Professor Vasilis Fiftanakis. Now, my understanding, and I'm a nurse and I've spent most of my professional career in healthcare, both with hospitals and as a nurse, my understanding is that cadmium is a highly toxic carcinogen and could pose serious public health risks if not handled properly. So, Mr. Ahern, my question is for you, at least this first question is, did you or First Solar or anyone on First Solar's behalf ever pay Professor Fiftanakis or any organization with him or that he was affiliated with for research related to cadmium telluride? And that's just a yes or a no, sir.
As you phrased that question, I think the answer would be yes.
Thank you. Now, on the screen, you're going to see a slide here from a First Solar PowerPoint presentation related to the company's use of cadmium telluride. The highlighted portion of the slide states, and I think, is this the right slide we have up? Okay. The highlighted portion of the slide states that a risk for First Solar is its reliance solely on the research of Professor Fiftanakis. And so my question again to you, Mr. Ahern, is did you or anyone on First Solar's behalf influence or recommend specific lines of research by Professor Fiftanakis in any fashion? And again, that's just a yes or no.
Well, the answer is no, but I think it's incomplete without further explanation.
Sure,
You would
go
allow
ahead.
me. So Professor Fiftanakis was employed by Brookhaven National Laboratory, which is charged by the Department of Energy with assessing the environmental health and safety aspects of all photovoltaic technologies. Before we invested and even after in First Solar, Brookhaven and the National Renewable Energy Lab conducted their own independent assessment of the use of cadmium. At some point after that, Vasilis Fiftanakis in Brookhaven associated with Columbia University and formed a life cycle study center. And we contributed money, I'm just not sure the entity or how it was done, to the Columbia University Center, but not with influence on any of their specific programs or research. So that's
Thank you. Perhaps you could comment then, the risk here on this first slide. We are almost completely reliant on Vasilis, and that's Professor Fiftanakis and his team. So, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this might relate to the European activities. So in the U.S., the independent assessment and validation work around cadmium had been done by Brookhaven and NREL. In Europe, there at one point had not been any comparable independent government agencies or work done to assess cadmium telluride because it hadn't been introduced to the market. And so we wanted to broaden the scope of research and interest the relevant agencies in Europe in conducting these kinds of assessments on cadmium telluride. So I believe that's what this is referring to.
Did you or anyone on First Solar's behalf at any time request that this research undertaken by the professor be kept confidential or otherwise not disclosed?
Not to my knowledge.
On the screen, you're going to see another slide, and I see that I'm running out of time here, so I'll make this quick, Mr. Chairman. On the screen, you're going to see another slide that from the First Solar presentation, again related to a risk matrix, stating successful future studies establish cadmium telluride photovoltaic desired outcomes. It sounds to me like you're trying to state goals for your company, and you're trying to really compromise the objectivity of scientific reports, and that, of course, is of grave concern to us. Given this evidence and this slide, Mr. Ahern, the Department of Energy's dedication to relying on credible and objective information seems to have been compromised by your campaign, and I just would ask whether you agree or disagree with that.
No, I disagree with that. Yeah, these look like they're dated back in 2006, and if you would permit me to explain, I think I can explain this, but okay. Quickly. So the issue we faced in Europe was what will competitors likely do relative to First Solar, because we have the lowest cost technology, and our area of vulnerability would have been around the use of cadmium. And so I think these slides are going to, how do you anticipate a competitive attack, and how do you get the scientific community engaged properly to get cadmium telluride recognized as a proper technology in Europe. So it was back in that earlier time frame.
Thank you, and I yield back my time.
I want to thank the gentlelady, and I know she has to run, I have to run too, and I promised you guys we'd be out by 12, and we are actually, I know this is hard to believe, we're going to be close. We have two left. Mr. Kelly's agreed to chair for the final two questions from our members. Mr. Desjardins will go first, then Mr. Kelly will close out the hearing and get the final round of questions. I want to thank all our witnesses for being here and for, making the trip and sacrifice it takes to come here and testify. We appreciate it. I think it's been a very good hearing. And as the chairman indicated, we plan to follow up with Mr. Chu and get some clarifications to his statements under oath back in March. But I want to thank our witnesses. With that, I'll turn the chair over to Mr. Kelly, and Mr. Desjardins is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the spirit of trying to stay on time, I was listening to Mr. Cummings, the ranking member's comments about the integrity of the panel sitting here. And, really what we're here for today is to look into whether or not the taxpayer money was spent wisely in this area, in these investments. And, I guess I might agree that it may not be any of your faults that these things didn't go like you wanted, but I would question whether or not it is a failure in government, once again, meddling probably where it doesn't belong, trying to invest in the private sector when we got a shining example in Mr. Nelson of what the American spirit and free enterprise can do if you leave it alone, if the federal government would simply stay out of the way. For all the taxpayers sitting here watching today, I'm sure that they're not very pleased with the way we, the federal government, invested their money in this case and in many cases in business. And so, clearly, maybe, not shame on you, shame on us for not doing our homework better, loaning money in areas where clearly the risk was very high. And I guess, I would wonder for all you sitting there, if you had to invest all that money out of your own pocket, whether you would have taken the same path. And, that's only a question you can answer. But this is the frustration we face here in the federal government and looking after the taxpayer money, trying to reduce this deficit and this spending problem that we have. We're asking right now, or a lot of people in Washington are asking to take more of the taxpayers' money. And I would challenge whether anybody watching this hearing today would agree that the federal government needs another dime of taxpayer money until it can learn to manage it better than what we've seen in this hearing today. So that's just one man's opinion, but I thank you all for joining us today, and I yield back.
Thank you, Doctor. Mr. Woolard, some of the questions have been, was there any political influence that was involved in these loans? Let me go to slide number 9. This is from Natalie Schaefer from Bright Source to Doug Schultz at DOE Loan Program. And it says, the team is at the White House and the Vice President's office at 10 o'clock tomorrow. So why at the White House and why at the VP meeting, and if it's not politically influenced? I mean, why not just the DOE?
I believe, if I'm trying to make sure I've got the dates accurate, this was in March of...
It's March 8th, 2011.
Yeah. So we had, whenever we had correspondence on the Hill, we talked to the members of Senate about policy. We talked to Carol Browner sometimes in the administration in the White House about broader policy issues.
Okay. So, I mean, you can see why, you know, these are your own emails, and so it comes up as, okay, there's no political influence being shown, we're not trying to go that way, but we're going to go to the White House, and then we're going to meet with the Vice President, but this is really just a briefing, just to keep them abreast of what's going on.
Yeah, well, we met with Lindsey Graham and others as well, and we met with...
well, I understand that, because I have people that come to my office every day, too. In fact, Mr. Aheron's people were in our office last week, and very nice people, and they really were, their concern was the respect shown to you folks. And I know this is like getting a root canal without Novocaine. I understand that. But it comes down to, this is taxpayer money, and because of what Mr. Mulvaney said, I'm a General Motors dealer. General Motors has gone through more scrutiny than anybody. And I get told on the sales floor all the time, I'd never buy a car from you guys again because you took the bailout. I said, well, actually, the dealership didn't get it. It went to the corporation. The corporation's no longer the corporation, da-da-da-da. But you go through all that stuff all the time. I got to tell you, Mr. Aheron, you absolutely, I looked at your resume and looked at your background. You are pretty astute when it comes to investing. There's no question about that. What happened at the end of the summer, in August of 2011, that all of a sudden the market started to drop? The shares for the company started to just go off a cliff.
The core issue is that the subsidy programs that were creating the market for solar, which are for the most part in Europe, began to shrink pretty drastically as a function of the fiscal problems in Europe and a variety of dynamics. And that was coupled with a massive oversupply of Chinese panels coming on the market. So basically the market space started to dry up, and that really impacted all the industry stocks across the board.
So all of them were tumbling?
They are all tumbling, yes.
And we look at Europe today, and we look at, really, the subsidies are driving. They just don't have enough money to continue to fund what they've been funding.
That's correct.
Okay. And the same thing really is pretty much going to happen here. We're running out of money to do the things that we think we should be doing, and so you run out of capital and there's no infusion. That's right, and that's why I think I agree with your overall point that we have to be in markets that are not subsidy dependent, and I think we're fortunate we had some time and ability to lower our costs, but we need to move now strongly into markets that do not require these types of subsidies, which is what we're doing now. Okay. So, and the market has, the energy market, and I know, I'm from Western Pennsylvania, and I know what's going on in Western Pennsylvania, and around the rest of the country, we look at all the fossils that are very much abundant and very much affordable and very accessible. So we're watching that go away, and I know that I would have gotten rid of my stock then too. Even though you had the loan guarantees coming in, you know, usually when you get the loan guarantees, it's like, okay, we got the money, we're going to be okay, but if you see the market kind of tanking, you say, you know what, it's time for me to get the heck out of here. I'm going to take my marbles and run. So I understand why you did that. That's a smart investor. Mr. Nelson, one of the administration's top justifications for the 1705 loan program was it just wasn't enough private capital. So what do you guys know that nobody else knows? Why didn't you go after that low-hanging fruit that was out there with the government money?
Well, the bottom line is that I believe in the long run it's economics, not government policy, that's going to drive widespread adoption of green energy. And our whole point of view is to reduce the cost of green energy so it's affordable for people. And that's our approach. Ultimately, we change the economics and don't rely on government funding. Right now, we have plenty of private funding to do what we need to do, and we anticipate that we'll come up with a product that will actually be competitive and close to grid parity, so it'll be widely demanded, and that people that we want to do business with will accept us as a partner. Okay. And I look at, again, your background, Mr. Aheron's background. You folks are venture capitalists. You were with Bain for a while, so you understand a little bit about investing and turning companies around and making them good again. My wife would say just a little bit. Just a little bit, yeah. Well, you know what, I'm interested in that because really, there's an old saying out there, if it's not market ready, no amount
subsidy will affect it, and if it is market ready, he doesn't need subsidized at all.
Well, that's the bottom line. We've talked a lot about innovation. Mr. Cummings talked articulately about innovation. The fact is that funding innovation is a really important part of the government's function in this, but that's different than the loan guarantee program. That funds commercialization, and commercialization should be a private function, and it should happen with good projects. When you have a project that isn't economically viable or which is above, which costs substantially more than economic alternatives, no amount of government subsidy will ever bring that into widespread adoption.
Probably not a good investment.
That's my feeling.
Okay, I wonder, because I'm looking at J.P. Morgan Chase, and I see the DOJ is going to do an investigation because they had a $2 billion loss, $20 billion profit, and the people that want to really come down hard on them are people that run $16 trillion in the red, that make investments every day, that if the shareholders in that company, which is the American taxpayers, they should be demanding also a look into what in the world are we doing with this money and where are we investing it, and at the end of the day, what do we come up with? So I think we're done for the day. Is there anything else that we're going to do? I want to thank you sincerely, and I know how difficult it is, but you know, Mick made a good point. You know, you can't follow this trend and then be upset because people hold you responsible for it. And I want you to understand, I have deep respect for what you do. My own life has been very much through hard work and sweat equity and everything else and a lot of skin in the game. So I understand, I know it's difficult. But when that money's put out there and they dangle that carrot in front of you, sometimes it's a Judas goat that you probably shouldn't follow because it really does come down hard on you. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Nelson. I watched you, read your background. I know exactly what works, what doesn't work, and I do agree with this is science that sometimes is just way ahead of the market. It's not economically viable right now. I mean, there will be a time sometime in the future, but maybe right now is not the right time. We haven't had a very good positive ROI on it. So with that, this hearing is now adjourned.